This is KM Weiland, and you are listening to the 194th episode of the Wordplay Podcast. After all the crazy busyness of the winter, I'm finally seeing an end in sight. I finished my latest rewrite of my historical work in progress, The Deepest Breath, a month or so ago, and it's been visiting betas ever since. My pile of research books for my historical fantasy Storming has dwindled to a bare handful, and I'm staring down the final chapters in the first draft of the annotated Jane Eyre. If all goes well, I'm thinking I should be finished with all my current projects by the middle of April. After a week or so of vacation to regroup my tattered brain cells, I then get to dive into Storming's first draft. Needless to say, I can't wait. The April issue of my e-letter hit inboxes last week. It included the usual roundup of inspirational quotes, creativity jumpstarters, and helpful links, as well as the article, What's Your Bad Guy's Motive?, and my response to a subscriber's question about head hopping. If you're not receiving the e-letter and would like to, you can sign up for my mailing list on my website at kmweiland, that's weiland.com/mailing-list.php. You can read back issues online at kmweiland.com/eletter-issues.php. 5 signs you might be a windbag. The latest post in the video series on my blog discusses the problems of overly long books and how to avoid them. To watch it, visit my website at www.helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. New videos are posted every Wednesday. And now, I hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. Most Common Writing Mistakes, Part 19. Why suddenly is a 4-letter word. What's one of the most overused, least needed words in a writer's repertoire? Try suddenly. At first glance, suddenly seems pretty innocuous. After all, it's just a little adverb. It's so commonplace, it's almost invisible. And it's important. Unlike so many useless modifiers, it tells readers exactly how some important action is happening. It provides a handy bridge between two actions, the latter of which is completely unexpected. But here's the thing about suddenly. It's almost always unneeded. More than that, it has this ironic tendency to mitigate the very effect it's trying to create. If something happens suddenly, its very suddenness is proven by its abrupt occurrence. Consider, for example, the moon rose above the hill, pale and serene. I sat on the roadside and watched it shed its light across the hayfields. From within the trees, the smoke from my brother's campfire wafted, blue-gray, to join the last cirrus clouds of the day. I settled onto a fallen log. Suddenly, from within the trees, a branch cracked. I sat up straight, and goose-flesh pimpled my skin. This doesn't look so bad on the surface, but what is suddenly adding to this scene? That branch certainly didn't crack unsuddenly. It happens without warning. The character has been caught off guard. So why is the author warning the readers? Why not let readers experience the abruptness of the cracking branch right alongside the character? For example, the moon rose above the hill, pale and serene. I sat on the roadside and watched it shed its light across the hayfields. From within the trees, the smoke from my brother's campfire wafted, blue-gray, to join the last cirrus clouds of the day. I settled onto a fallen log. From within the trees, a branch cracked. I sat up straight, and goose-flesh pimpled my skin. By deleting suddenly, we maintain the scene's clarity while giving it just a little extra punch. A paragraph break and a strong verb convey the sense of abruptness to the reader by way of showing instead of telling. Readers probably won't even notice when you delete suddenly, but they will unconsciously respond to the tighter writing. So does that mean that all instances of suddenly should be hacked ruthlessly? Not at all. Suddenly still has its uses, one of which is poetic rhythm. Sometimes sentences will just sound better for retaining suddenly, but always double check. More often than not, when an author feels the suddenly is helpful, it really isn't adding much of anything. You might also find suddenly useful in sentences that indicate a character's abrupt change of mind. Compare the following examples. What are you doing? Sam looked around, aware of how many people could overhear them. Versus, what are you doing? Sam looked around, suddenly aware of how many people could overhear them. In the first example, Sam appears to have been aware of the listening ears right from the start. But if your intent is to show he's only just realizing the potential for eavesdroppers as he's looking around, then suddenly is just the trick you need. Don't be afraid of using suddenly when your story calls for it, but keep in mind that you'll be better off without it more often than not. Thank you for listening to the Wordplay Podcast. To read a transcript of this episode, you can visit my website at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. And be sure to check back again next week.